The warm South African breeze carried the scent of jasmine through the open balcony doors as Melissa Chambers stood frozen, staring at the document spread across the hotel bed. Her wedding ring caught the afternoon light, still unfamiliar on her finger after just 10 days of marriage. The papers before her told a story so horrific, so unimaginable, that her mind refused to process it. Shipping manifests, medical charts, payment records, and her signature, her own handwriting, on documents authorizing what she now realized were human cargo transports. How could the man who had vowed to love her just days ago be orchestrating such evil? And worse, how could she have been involved without knowing? Have you ever wondered how well you truly know the person sharing your life? What secrets might lie beneath the surface of someone you've entrusted with your heart? For Melissa, a dedicated pediatric nurse from Atlanta, that question would haunt her for the rest of her life. Melissa had always prided herself on her compassion, her ability to spot suffering and ease pain. Yet somehow, she had missed the darkness growing in her own home, spreading like a cancer through her new marriage. When we fall in love, do we see the person before us, or merely the reflection of who we want them to be? What would you do if you discovered the person you married was living a double life? Would you confront them immediately, or gather evidence first? And what if that evidence implicated you as well? This isn't just another tale of deception. It's a journey into the heart of moral compromise, where good intentions pave a road to unimaginable horror. What makes this story uniquely devastating is how ordinary their beginning was: two medical professionals dedicated to healing, whose relationship would ultimately destroy countless lives. In the coming minutes, you'll witness how a honeymoon in Cape Town transformed from a romantic getaway into a nightmare that would expose an international medical trafficking ring, leaving bodies and shattered lives in its wake. And at the center of it all, a newlywed couple whose relationship would unravel alongside their freedom. And now, we want to say a huge thank you to our incredible subscribers for your loyalty and support. Your enthusiasm fuels our passion to dig deeper and share the most captivating daily updates on true crime stories, both famous and forgotten. Haven't joined the Guilty Whispers community yet? Click that subscribe button to become a part of our growing family of true crime enthusiasts. Ring the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. There's still so much to uncover, stay tuned. Melissa Stewart grew up in a modest home in Columbus, Georgia, where her mother worked as a school nurse. From childhood, Melissa shadowed her mother, learning to bandage scraped knees and comfort crying children. By 16, she was volunteering at the local hospital, and her path seemed clear. After nursing school at Spelman College, she specialized in pediatric care, eventually landing at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, where her gentle manner and technical skill made her a favorite among both patients and colleagues. For Melissa, nursing wasn't just a career, it was a calling. She lived in a small apartment filled with thank you cards from families whose children she'd helped heal. Weekends were spent volunteering at community health fairs in underserved neighborhoods. Dating took a backseat to her 12-hour shifts and volunteer work. By 32, she had resigned herself to the possibility that her personal life might remain on hold indefinitely. Dr. Leonard Chambers moved through the world differently. The son of a prominent black surgeon from Washington, D.C., Leonard had grown up with privilege and purpose. Howard Medical School, followed by a residency at Johns Hopkins, then a meteoric rise through hospital administration. By 40, he had become the youngest director of Atlanta Memorial Hospital, known for his fundraising prowess and vision for healthcare equity. Their paths crossed at a hospital fundraiser in spring 2019. Melissa had been invited to speak about pediatric care initiatives. Leonard, impressed by her passion, approached her afterward. Your speech moved donors to tears, and to open their checkbooks, he told her with a warm smile that lit up his eyes. We need more advocates like you. What began as professional admiration quickly blossomed. Leonard sent flowers to her department the next day with a note asking her to dinner. Their first date lasted 5 hours, conversation flowing effortlessly from healthcare policy to favorite childhood memories. Leonard listened intently as Melissa spoke about her dreams for community health programs. He shared his own vision of building medical partnerships in Africa, particularly in South Africa, where his maternal grandparents had roots. "I want to create a bridge between Atlanta's medical community and clinics in Cape Town," he explained over their third dinner date. "There's so much we can learn from each other, and so much good we could do together." Their courtship progressed with the intensity of two people who had found their match later in life. Leonard's world was larger, more cosmopolitan than Melissa's: charity galas, medical conferences, political connections. He introduced her to influential figures in healthcare and philanthropy. For her part, Melissa brought Leonard to community health fairs, showing him the frontline realities of patient care that administrators rarely witnessed. 6 months after they met, Leonard proposed during a weekend trip to Savannah. The ring, his grandmother's diamond reset in platinum, symbolized the blend of tradition and modernity that defined them as a couple. Melissa accepted without hesitation. At their engagement party, Leonard's toast brought guests to tears. "In Melissa, I've found not just a partner in life, but a partner in purpose." The wedding planning coincided with Leonard's biggest professional project yet, a partnership between Atlanta Memorial and a network of clinics in Cape Town. The initiative would establish training exchanges, equipment donations, and telemedicine programs. Leonard traveled to South Africa twice during their engagement, returning with photos of clinics and stories of patients whose lives would be transformed. "I need your help with something," Leonard said one evening, 3 months before their wedding. He spread documents across their dining table: shipping forms, inventory lists, grant applications. "The paperwork for medical equipment donations is overwhelming. Your attention to detail would be invaluable." Melissa was touched by his trust in her abilities. Evenings and weekends, she helped organize the logistics, signing forms as Leonard's authorized representative when his schedule was too packed for him to handle the details. The work gave her a sense of contribution to something meaningful beyond her daily nursing duties. Their wedding day arrived on a perfect autumn Saturday. The ceremony at Ebenezer Baptist Church brought together 200 guests, hospital colleagues, community members, family from both sides. Melissa's mother cried when Leonard included a promise in his vows to support your healing hands and compassionate heart in all the good work you do. The reception at the Atlanta History Center featured a donation station where guests could contribute to the South African Healthcare Initiative instead of giving traditional gifts. As they planned their honeymoon, Leonard suggested combining romance with purpose. "What if we spend 2 weeks in Cape Town? The first week at a beachfront resort, just us. The second week, I could show you the clinics, introduce you to the staff you've been helping from afar." The idea thrilled Melissa. "I'd love to see firsthand what we've been working toward," she said, imagining the faces of patients benefiting from their efforts. In the weeks before departure, Leonard grew increasingly busy, often returning home late from meetings about the initiative. "Growing pains," he explained when Melissa noticed his stress. "International partnerships are complex." She took on more of the honeymoon planning, researching Cape Town's attractions while Leonard finalized the clinic arrangements. The night before their wedding trip, as they packed their suitcases, Leonard received a call that took him into the home office for nearly an hour. When he returned, Melissa noticed a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. "Is everything okay with the clinics?" she asked. Leonard's smile returned quickly. "Just last-minute logistics. Nothing for you to worry about." He kissed her forehead. "Tomorrow, we begin our life together, in every way." As their plane took off the next morning, Melissa gazed at her new husband, feeling a surge of pride. They weren't just taking a honeymoon, they were embarking on a shared mission. How fortunate she was to have found a partner whose commitment to healing matched her own. If only she had recognized the warning signs already flashing before her eyes. The Cape Town International Airport buzzed with activity as Melissa and Leonard cleared customs. Outside, the dramatic silhouette of Table Mountain rose against a cloudless sky. Their driver, arranged by Leonard's contacts, greeted them with a warm "molo" before whisking them to the waterfront resort in Camps Bay. Their suite offered breathtaking ocean views, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a private terrace. "It's paradise," Melissa whispered, taking in the turquoise waters and palm trees swaying in the breeze. Leonard wrapped his arms around her from behind. "Only the best for my bride." The first 3 days unfolded like a dream: breakfast overlooking the Atlantic, wine tasting in Stellenbosch, a cable car ride up Table Mountain. Leonard was attentive, romantic, present in a way his busy schedule rarely allowed back home. Yet on their 4th night, as they returned from dinner, Leonard's phone buzzed with a message that transformed his demeanor. "I need to make a call," he said, voice suddenly professional. "Hospital business." Melissa nodded, used to the demands of healthcare. But as she prepared for bed, she noticed Leonard had stepped onto the terrace and closed the door behind him. His voice, though muffled, carried tones of urgency she'd never heard before. 20 minutes later, when he returned, his explanation came too quickly. "Supply chain issues at one of the clinics. Nothing serious." The next morning, Leonard suggested Melissa enjoy a spa day while he checked in at the main clinic. "Just for a few hours," he promised. "Then I'm all yours again." At the spa, as the massage therapist worked on her shoulders, Melissa found herself distracted by questions. Why hadn't Leonard invited her along? Wouldn't it make sense to introduce his new wife to his colleagues? The tension the therapist was addressing wasn't just from travel, it was from the first seed of doubt. Leonard returned that evening with a gift, a beautiful beaded necklace made by local artisans. As he fastened it around her neck, he mentioned casually, "I've arranged for us to visit the main clinic tomorrow. The staff is excited to meet you." The Confidentiality Health Initiative occupied a recently renovated building on the outskirts of Cape Town. From the outside, it looked impressive, modern architecture with the initiative's logo prominently displayed. Inside, the reception area gleamed with new equipment and furnishings. Dr. Thabo Ndlovu, the clinic director, greeted them warmly, though Melissa noticed his eyes darting to Leonard with what seemed like nervousness. The tour proceeded through examination rooms, a small laboratory, and administrative offices. Everything appeared state-of-the-art, yet strangely quiet for a functioning clinic. "Where are the patients?" Melissa asked. "Morning hours only," Dr. Ndlovu explained quickly. "Afternoons are for administrative work and special cases." As they approached a hallway with several doors, Leonard placed his hand on Melissa's back, subtly steering her in another direction. "The supply rooms. Nothing interesting there." Later, as they were leaving, a young woman approached them in the parking lot. "Excuse me," she said in accented English. "Are you from the American hospital?" Before Melissa could respond, Leonard stepped between them. "Yes, I'm Dr. Chambers. This is my wife." The woman introduced herself as Zinzi Kumalo, a community health advocate. "I've been trying to schedule a meeting with clinic administration for weeks. There are concerns in the township." "You should make an appointment through proper channels," Leonard interrupted, his tone dismissive. "I've tried," Zinzi persisted, handing Melissa a business card. "Perhaps you could help. It's about the missing young men." Leonard's hand tightened around Melissa's waist. "We're on our honeymoon. Contact my office in Atlanta." He guided Melissa to their waiting car, his grip uncomfortably firm. "What was that about missing men?" Melissa asked as they drove away. Leonard sighed. "Local conspiracy theories. Every few months, rumors spread about missing people. It's usually young men who've simply left for jobs in Johannesburg without telling their families." That night, Leonard received another call during dinner, excusing himself for nearly 30 minutes. When he returned, he announced he needed to visit another clinic the following day. "An emergency situation with equipment installation. You should enjoy the beach, I'd just be dragging you into boring technical discussions." Alone the next day, Melissa found herself staring at Zinzi's business card. On impulse, she called the number. They met at a small cafe near the waterfront, away from the tourist areas. Zinzi arrived with a folder tucked under her arm, her expression grave. "I apologize for approaching you so directly," Zinzi began, "but we're desperate. In the past 8 months, 17 young men from Masipumalele Township have disappeared. Healthy men, ages 18 to 30. The police claim they've left for work, but their families have received no calls, no money sent home." "What does this have to do with the clinic?" Melissa asked. Zinzi lowered her voice. 3 of the missing men were last seen near the clinic. One was actually going there for a job interview as a maintenance worker. Melissa felt a chill despite the warm day. "Have you reported this?" "Of course. But the clinic has powerful connections." Zinzi hesitated. "I'm sorry to ask this, but how much do you know about your husband's work here?" The question stung. "Everything," Melissa said defensively. "I helped set up the partnership." Zinzi nodded slowly. "Then perhaps you can explain why a clinic serving a poor community needs a high-security storage facility with refrigeration units? Or why deliveries happen only at night?" Melissa's mind raced to find innocent explanations. Vaccines needed refrigeration. Security was necessary for valuable medical equipment. Yet Leonard's secretive behavior, the locked rooms, his dismissal of Zinzi, all of it suddenly formed a disturbing pattern. "I should go," Melissa said, standing abruptly. "Please," Zinzi said, sliding a piece of paper across the table. "This is my personal number. If you notice anything unusual, anything at all." Back at the hotel, Melissa paced their suite, torn between loyalty and growing suspicion. When Leonard returned that evening, she watched him carefully, the way he checked his phone repeatedly, his vague answers about the day's activities, the slight tremor in his hands as he poured a drink. "Is everything okay with the clinics?" she asked carefully. "Just the usual challenges of international aid work," he replied, not quite meeting her eyes. That night, Leonard's phone buzzed at 2 a.m. Through half-closed eyes, Melissa watched him slip from bed, grab his clothes, and disappear into the bathroom. Minutes later, she heard the suite door close quietly. What would you do if your spouse disappeared in the middle of the night in a foreign country? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Would you follow them, confront them later, or trust there was a reasonable explanation? In that moment, Melissa made a decision that would change everything. Slipping from bed, she quickly dressed in dark clothes. By the time she reached the hotel lobby, she could see Leonard getting into a waiting car. Melissa approached the night doorman. "I need a taxi. Now." "To follow that car." The taxi driver seemed unsurprised by Melissa's urgent request to follow another vehicle. "American?" he asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "Yes," Melissa replied, eyes fixed on the taillights of Leonard's car ahead. "Please keep a distance. I don't want them to see us." The driver nodded knowingly. "Not my first time doing this, ma'am." They drove through Cape Town's sleeping streets, eventually leaving the affluent coastal areas behind. The landscape changed, luxury hotels giving way to industrial zones, then to the outskirts where informal settlements pressed against the highway. Leonard's car turned onto a poorly lit road leading to what appeared to be a warehouse district. "Should I continue?" the driver asked as Leonard's vehicle disappeared around a corner. Melissa hesitated only briefly. "Yes. But stop before we reach that turn." The driver pulled over about 50 yards from where Leonard's car had vanished. Melissa paid him generously, adding extra with a request, "Wait for me. 30 minutes. If I'm not back, leave." Heart pounding, she moved along the shadows of the buildings. The night air carried the scent of the ocean, now mixed with industrial smells. Ahead, she spotted Leonard's car parked beside 3 other vehicles outside a nondescript warehouse with a small sign, MHI Medical Storage. MHI, Masipumalele Health Initiative. The connection sent a chill through her. Melissa crept closer, finding cover behind stacked shipping containers. A loading dock door stood partially open, spilling yellow light onto the pavement. Voices carried in the night air, men speaking a mix of English and what she guessed was Zulu. Then Leonard's voice, unmistakable in its authority, "Move quickly. The transport leaves in 40 minutes." Edging closer, Melissa positioned herself where she could see through a gap in the doorway. The warehouse interior was divided into sections. In the main area, 4 young men lay on gurneys, unconscious, with 4 lines running into their arms. Medical monitors beeped steadily beside each one. Medical staff in scrubs moved efficiently around them, checking vital signs. Leonard stood with Dr. Ndlovu from the clinic, reviewing documents on a clipboard. Both wore surgical masks pulled down below their chins, speaking in low, urgent tones. "Donor A is ready for extraction," a technician called out. "Blood type confirmed O negative, tissue matching complete." Donor. The word hit Melissa like a physical blow. These weren't patients. They were sources of organs. "Move him to prep," Leonard instructed, gesturing to the first gurney. "The buyer's surgeon is waiting. Kidney and partial liver from this one." Melissa pressed her hand against her mouth to stifle a gasp. The donor, being wheeled toward another section of the warehouse, was barely more than a boy, perhaps 19 or 20. His unconscious face was peaceful, unaware that parts of his body were about to be harvested. "What about the others?" Dr. Ndlovu asked. "2 for kidney pairs, 1 for heart and lungs," Leonard replied, checking his watch. "The private jet is fueled and waiting. We have a 6-hour window to complete all procedures and get the organs to Johannesburg for international distribution." Melissa's mind raced to process what she was witnessing. The missing young men Zinzi had mentioned, they weren't missing. They were here, being prepared for organ harvesting. And Leonard, her husband of less than 2 weeks, was directing the operation. A sudden movement to her right startled her. A security guard had stepped outside for a cigarette. Melissa froze, pressing herself against the shipping container. The guard's phone rang and he answered in Zulu. His attention momentarily diverted. Melissa seized the opportunity to slip away, moving quickly back toward where her taxi waited. Her foot caught on something, a metal pipe, sending it clattering across the pavement. "Hey," the guard called out, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. "Stop." Adrenaline surging, Melissa ran. Behind her, she heard the guard shouting, doors opening, more voices. She reached the main road just as her taxi driver was preparing to leave. "Go," she gasped, throwing herself into the back seat. "Please, just drive." As they pulled away, Melissa glanced back. No one had followed her to the main road. For now, she was safe. But the images of those unconscious young men would be forever seared into her memory. Back at the hotel, Melissa paced her room in panic. Leonard would return eventually. Would he know she had followed him? What would he do if he suspected she had discovered his secret? She couldn't confront him, not here, not alone in a foreign country where he clearly had powerful connections. Her hands shook as she dialed Zinzi's number. "I saw it," she whispered when Zinzi answered. "You were right. They're taking organs from young men. My husband is involved. I need help." Zinzi arrived at the hotel 30 minutes later, accompanied by a man she introduced as Tato Nkosi, a journalist who had been investigating the disappearances. "We need evidence," Tato explained. "Allegations against powerful medical figures require proof." "I can get you into the clinic," Melissa said. "Leonard gave me an access card. He said it was a gesture of trust, that as his wife, I should have access to his work." The irony wasn't lost on any of them. They agreed to meet the following afternoon when the clinic would be minimally staffed. Melissa would create a diversion while Zinzi and Tato accessed the administrative offices. "What about Leonard?" Zinzi asked. "Won't he be suspicious if you suddenly want to visit the clinic?" He's scheduled to be at a different facility tomorrow, Melissa replied. I checked his calendar while he was in the shower. After they left, Melissa sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she had discovered. How had she missed the signs? The late-night calls. The secretive meetings. The vague explanations about medical supplies. She opened her laptop and logged into her email, searching for anything connected to the initiative. There, in her sent items folder, were dozens of emails she had sent on Leonard's behalf during their engagement, authorizing shipments, confirming deliveries, signing off on facility modifications. With growing horror, she realized she had been an unwitting accomplice. One email particularly stood out, her response to a shipping company about specialized refrigeration requirements for biological materials. She had simply forwarded Leonard's instructions, adding her signature as his authorized representative. Now, the meaning behind those clinical terms was devastatingly clear. When Leonard returned to their suite near dawn, Melissa pretended to be asleep. Through barely open eyes, she watched him remove his clothes and place them in a plastic hotel laundry bag, then shower for nearly 30 minutes. When he finally slid into bed beside her, she could feel him watching her, as if checking whether she had stirred during his absence. The next morning, over breakfast on their terrace, Leonard announced he had another meeting at the satellite clinic. I'm sorry to keep disappearing, he said, reaching for her hand. Just 2 more days of work, then the rest of our honeymoon is all about us. Melissa forced a smile. I understand. Actually, I thought I might visit the main clinic today. Dr. Newlywed mentioned a pediatric program I'd like to learn more about. Something flickered in Leonard's eyes, concern? Suspicion? But his voice remained steady. Of course. Use my access card. I'll call ahead to let them know you're coming. As he kissed her goodbye, Melissa wondered if it would be the last normal moment between them. By day's end, their marriage, and Leonard's freedom, would likely be over. The clinic's reception area was quiet when Melissa arrived that afternoon. A single receptionist looked up with a practiced smile. Mrs. Chambers, we've been expecting you. Dr. Newlywed asked me to apologize. He was called away unexpectedly but said you're welcome to tour our facilities. Perfect. Melissa returned the smile. That's fine. I'm particularly interested in the pediatric program. Of course. Let me call someone to escort you. No need, Melissa said quickly. I'd prefer to look around on my own. My husband gave me his access card. She held up Leonard's card, the one he'd forgotten, in their hotel room that morning. The receptionist hesitated, then nodded. As you wish, Mrs. Chambers. Melissa made her way through the clinic, noting security cameras tracking her movement. According to their plan, Zinzi and Tato would enter through a service door using a code provided by one of Zinzi's contacts, a cleaning staff member who had grown suspicious of late-night activities. In the pediatric wing, Melissa engaged a nurse in conversation about treatment protocols, positioning herself so the security cameras had a clear view of her location. Meanwhile, Zinzi and Tato would be searching administrative offices for documentation of the trafficking operation. 20 minutes into her diversion, Melissa's phone vibrated with a text from Zinzi, found files. Need more time. Melissa continued her tour, asking detailed questions about equipment and procedures. The staff seemed genuinely dedicated to pediatric care, unaware of the darker operations happening elsewhere in the facility. This legitimate medical work provided the perfect cover for Leonard's organ trafficking. Another text came through, evidence secured. Meeting point in 10. Melissa thanked the staff and made her way toward the exit. As she passed the hallway Leonard had steered her away from during their tour, curiosity overcame caution. Using his access card, she opened one of the doors. Inside was what appeared to be a recovery room with 6 beds, currently empty but clearly prepared for use. Medical monitors, 4 stands, and ventilators stood ready. A refrigerated cabinet labeled immunosuppressants contained medications used for transplant patients. This wasn't for the township residents receiving care, this was for recipients of the trafficked organs. Melissa quickly photographed the room with her phone before continuing to the exit. Outside, she found Zinzi and Tato waiting in a car around the corner. "We need to go to the police immediately," Tato said as Melissa slid into the back seat. "What we found confirms everything." At the Cape Town Central Police Station, Detective Lumka Dlamini of the Organized Crime Unit listened intently as they presented their evidence. The files Zinzi and Tato had retrieved included donor profiles, detailed medical information on young men from townships, many listed as volunteers, with signatures that appeared forged. Financial records showed payments to various officials who had looked the other way. Most damning were shipping manifests for medical materials that aligned perfectly with the disappearances Zinzi had been tracking. "This operation is sophisticated," Detective Dlamini noted, examining the documents. "International organ trafficking networks typically have protection from powerful people. My husband is connected to hospital administrators and government officials both here and in the United States," Melissa said, her voice hollow. "He's built his reputation on humanitarian medical work." The detective nodded grimly. The perfect cover. As they reviewed the evidence, Detective Dlamini paused at a document bearing Melissa's signature, authorization for specialized refrigeration equipment. "Can you explain this, Mrs. Chambers?" Melissa felt the blood drain from her face. "I signed many documents for the initiative during our engagement. Leonard said they were for medical supplies, equipment donations. I had no idea." Detective Dlamini's expression remained neutral. "Your cooperation now is noted, but we'll need to investigate your level of involvement." The next hours passed in a blur of statements, evidence cataloging, and planning. By evening, a task force had been assembled. The operation would move quickly, simultaneous raids on the warehouse, the main clinic, and the satellite facility where Leonard was currently working. "What about me?" Melissa asked. "Leonard will be suspicious if I'm not at the hotel. We need you to return there," Detective Dlamini explained. "Act normally. We'll move at midnight." That evening, when Leonard returned to their suite, Melissa performed the hardest role of her life, the adoring new wife. She described her visit to the pediatric program, asked about his day, suggested dinner on their terrace rather than going out. All while her phone sat in her purse, tracking app activated, monitored by the police task force. Over dinner, Leonard seemed distracted, checking his phone frequently. "There's an issue at the warehouse," he finally said. "I need to handle it tonight." "On our honeymoon?" Melissa feigned disappointment while her heart raced. "Can't someone else deal with it?" "I'm sorry, my love. It's sensitive equipment, millions in donations that could be compromised." He kissed her forehead. "I'll be back before you know it." As Leonard left the hotel, Detective Dlamini's text arrived, "Target moving. Operation commencing." The raid made international headlines. International organ trafficking ring busted in Cape Town. News outlets showed footage of Leonard being led away in handcuffs, his face a mask of cold fury. 17 young men were rescued, sedated but alive, awaiting harvesting. Some had been held for weeks in a hidden section of the warehouse. The operation extended beyond South Africa. Coordinated arrests occurred in 3 countries, including medical professionals who performed the transplants and brokers who found wealthy clients willing to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars for organs. For Melissa, the aftermath brought its own nightmare. Though initially hailed as a whistleblower, questions about her involvement soon emerged. Her signatures appeared on dozens of documents related to the trafficking operation. Financial records showed transfers to accounts she shared with Leonard. The prosecution argued that her nursing background made it implausible she wouldn't recognize the true nature of the medical supplies being shipped. Leonard's defense strategy became clear during preliminary hearings: paint Melissa as a full partner who was turning on him to save herself. His attorneys produced emails, photos of her at fundraisers for the initiative, her work organizing the logistics. "My client's wife was not an unwitting accomplice," Leonard's attorney told reporters. "Mrs. Chambers has a medical background. She processed documentation for specialized organ transport containers. She helped establish the financial channels. Now she claims ignorance?" The South African prosecutors, while acknowledging Melissa's crucial role in exposing the operation, couldn't ignore the evidence of her involvement. They offered a deal, testimony against Leonard and his network in exchange for a reduced charge of negligent facilitation rather than conspiracy. Back in Atlanta, the hospital board distanced itself from both Chambers. Colleagues who had attended their wedding just weeks earlier now avoided eye contact when Melissa's name appeared in news reports. The pediatric unit where she had once been respected was now fielding angry calls from parents who didn't want their children treated by a hospital associated with organ trafficking. The victims' stories emerged gradually. Young men from impoverished townships, promised well-paying jobs at the clinic, only to be drugged and prepared for organ harvesting. Some families had been searching for months, their reports dismissed by authorities influenced by Leonard's network. Zinzi organized support services for the survivors and their families, becoming the public face of accountability. In interviews, she acknowledged Melissa's courage in coming forward while noting the uncomfortable truth: the system worked because good people didn't ask questions. They accepted the narrative of medical charity without looking deeper. For the young men who had nearly become donors, the physical and psychological recovery would be long. For Melissa, facing both legal jeopardy and the destruction of her personal and professional life, one question remained unanswered: had she been merely a pawn in Leonard's scheme, or had she chosen not to see what was happening right before her eyes? 6 months after the raid in Cape Town, Melissa sat in a sparse apartment in Johannesburg, watching rain streak the windows. The South African courts had released her on bail with strict travel restrictions while the case against Leonard and his co-conspirators proceeded. Her U.S. passport remained in police custody. The apartment, paid for by her mother's retirement savings, had become both refuge and prison. The trial had begun 3 weeks earlier. Each day, Melissa took her place in the witness box, recounting details of her relationship with Leonard, explaining documents she had signed, emails she had sent. Under the prosecution's guidance, she walked the court through her discovery of the trafficking operation and her decision to alert authorities. Under cross-examination, Leonard's attorney was merciless. "Mrs. Chambers, you expect this court to believe that a trained medical professional couldn't recognize descriptions of organ transport containers? That you never questioned why a small community clinic needed industrial-grade refrigeration units?" The questions haunted her nights. Why hadn't she questioned more? The signs had been there: Leonard's secretiveness, the restricted areas, the late-night calls. Had she been so blinded by love, so flattered by his inclusion of her in his humanitarian work, that she had willfully ignored what should have been obvious? In the courtroom, Leonard never looked at her directly. He sat impassively as evidence mounted: financial records showing millions flowing through shell companies, testimony from medical staff who had been coerced into participation, heartbreaking accounts from families of the victims. The most damning testimony came from Dr. Ndlovu, who had accepted a plea deal. He described how Leonard had conceived the operation after identifying a perfect convergence of factors: desperate poverty in the townships, wealthy international clients needing organs, and a legitimate medical initiative that could serve as cover. "Dr. Chambers told me that Americans are particularly useful fronts for such operations," Dr. Ndlovu testified. "Their reputation for humanitarian work creates an assumption of good intentions." His wife's involvement added another layer of legitimacy. Wife. The word no longer felt real to Melissa. The man she had married existed only in her memory, a carefully constructed fiction designed to win her trust and utilize her skills. Outside the courtroom, public opinion remained divided. Some viewed Melissa as another victim of Leonard's manipulation. Others saw her as willfully complicit, turning on her husband only when discovery became inevitable. Medical ethics panels in the United States had already suspended her nursing license pending the outcome of the trial. The young men who had survived were rebuilding their lives with varying degrees of success. Some had become advocates against medical exploitation. Others retreated from public view, traumatized by their near miss with death. 3 had filed civil suits against the Atlanta hospital, claiming institutional negligence in overseeing Leonard's international activities. For the families of those who hadn't been so fortunate, young men who had disappeared before the trafficking ring was exposed, there was only grief compounded by uncertainty. Had their sons, brothers, and husbands fallen victim to the same operation? The investigation continued to uncover evidence suggesting the ring had been active for at least 2 years before Melissa's discovery. On the final day of testimony, the lead prosecutor asked Melissa a question that cut to the heart of the case. Looking back, what would you have done differently? Melissa looked not at the prosecutor but at the families of the victims seated in the gallery. I would have questioned everything, she said, her voice steady despite her tears. Every document I signed, every explanation I accepted, every time I chose trust over verification. I was a nurse who prided myself on protecting the vulnerable, yet I failed to see how my actions, and my inactions, were enabling their exploitation. She paused, then continued, I can't undo the harm that was done. I can only acknowledge my responsibility in not recognizing what was happening, and commit to ensuring such blind trust never again facilitates such horror. The case of Leonard and Melissa Chambers forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about the relationships we build and the trust we extend. How well do we really know those closest to us? At what point does ignorance become complicity? When we participate in systems without questioning their true nature, are we innocent of the harm they cause? For the survivors and their communities, justice would never be complete. No verdict could restore what had been taken, their sense of safety, their trust in medical institutions meant to heal rather than exploit. The trafficking ring had targeted those society had already made vulnerable, counting on their invisibility to operate undetected. Perhaps the most important legacy of this case is its reminder that true care for others requires vigilance, not just good intentions. Systems of exploitation thrive when we accept surface appearances and convenient explanations. They collapse when we ask difficult questions, when we look beyond the narrative we're presented, when we recognize that our silence and compliance can enable tremendous harm. The truth behind closed doors can only come to light when we have the courage to share it. If this story moved you, help others discover it by sharing this video. And don't forget to subscribe to Guilty Whispers. Together, we can ensure that stories like Melissa's are never forgotten and that justice finds its voice. In the end, the most haunting question isn't whether Melissa was a pawn or a partner in Leonard's crimes. It's whether any of us can truly claim innocence when we choose not to see what's happening right in front of us.